Hey everybody, this is Dr. Robinson. I'm going to provide you a brief overview of Chapter 3. This is just a bit of an introduction or a bit of, like I said, an overview. Reading the chapter, reading the article, and doing the module is up to you. But I'm going to just sort of talk about some of the things in the chapter that I really want you to pay attention to. And maybe sort of connect some of these pieces to theories in a way that I hope makes sense. Okay, so jumping into this chapter, there's a lot in here that deals with ethics and ethics in general, and you have an entire course on ethics, and so I'm not going to sort of belabor that topic or belabor that concept. Or just really go over the ethics in detail because you have a course for that. But know that the ethical codes are there to guide us. They are the fundamental principles for our field and the way that we behave, but they do not make decisions for us. They are ambiguous at times. They're ethical decision-making models that help you progress through a dilemma. But the ACA Code of Ethics is our guidelines and our guiding principles. And so we'll talk a little bit about how I'm not going to go into mandatory and aspirational ethics or positive ethics. I think those are things that you need to read and you need to know about. But I'm going to go into theory. I'm going to talk about this stuff as it relates to theories. Your book discusses informed consent, and informed consent refers to making sure that your client knows what they are getting into, making sure that your client knows their rights and responsibilities, they know issues related to privacy and confidentiality, and that they know your view and your approach to counseling. They also need to know their involvement, their role in counseling. And so that's directly related to theory. How do you and your theory conceptualize the involvement of the client and your work with the client? And this is spelled out in your declaration of practice, and you're going to discuss this certainly in the intake session and maybe even again in your first session during a biopsychosocial. You're going to discuss this enough so that your client understands what they're getting into and that they're informed of their rights. They need to know how you and your theory establish goals with your client, of course, and maybe even the length of treatment. If your theory is short term or if it's a shorter based theory, so you have less counseling sessions, your clients need to know that. Your clients need to know if you use a theory that believes in long-term counseling and long-term treatment. They need to know what they're getting into. They need to know risks and benefits. So if you're doing some sort of theory that is a bit more challenging or confrontational, maybe Gestalt or maybe if you're incorporating some feminist theory, you need to make sure your client is okay and aware that this is the approach you're going to take. You also need to make sure that your clients are aware of their ability, decision, and process for withdrawing from treatment. If the fit isn't there, then they need to withdraw, and that fit depends upon you. It depends upon your client. It depends upon the therapeutic relationship, the environment. All of these sort of factors go into whether the client's comfortable or not with you, and whether or not they want to continue working with you based off of fit. I'm not going to go into limits to confidentiality, except to say that regardless of your theory, your limits to confidentiality are the same. So everything is confidential, except if the client poses a danger to themselves or others. So essentially, if the client wants to kill themselves, the client wants to kill someone else, if there is reasonable suspicion of abuse or neglect against a child, somebody elderly or disabled, or if you think that there was previous, abuse or neglect, you're mandated to break confidentiality. And then, of course, if there's hospitalization or if you're mandated by the court. So what I really want to touch on is we talked a lot in Chapter 2 about multicultural competence and how that's an ethical responsibility that you have, and how your theory needs to address, ethically, your theory needs to address multicultural issues and concerns. You need to be culturally competent in your practice. That is an ethical mandate. That is a responsibility. That is a requirement. I want to jump to diagnosis just for a bit. Some theories don't consider diagnosing clients to be beneficial. They don't consider the value in it. They don't see the benefit of it, or if the benefit of it is seen or known or considered, the reasons to not diagnose outweigh the reasons to diagnose. And so what you need to know about this is, regardless of that view or that theory, if you're working in an agency setting, or you're taking insurance, or certain sort of treatment planning processes, or certain circumstances will certainly dictate that you have to diagnose. And so regardless of your theoretical belief or your theoretical orientation, you do need to diagnose as part of our profession. You diagnose, and again, some theories don't find the benefit in this. Talking a little bit about of evidence-based practices, and your assignment for this module centers around sort of the advantages and disadvantages of using evidence-based practices. There's a lot of talk in our field currently about exactly that, the disadvantages and the advantages of evidence-based practices. And I don't want to give you, I don't want to lead you in one direction or another, but know that some of the theories that we discuss are not considered to be evidence-based practices, that they're not necessarily validated by empirical research. And to that extent, empirical research can be somewhat limiting in determining whether or not a therapeutic relationship is beneficial or not. Again, remember we talked about this, the perception the client has, the work that the client does, the relationship you have with that client. These are all curative factors. However, evidence-based practices are usually addressing like brief counseling or sort of standardized approaches. If you're in a treatment center or in an agency, you may have a curriculum, you may have a matrix, you may have some sort of workbook that they have to do, your clients have to do. They are preferred by insurance companies, predominantly preferred by insurance companies, so that they, it's just the nature of managed care. And sort of the idea, or the idea was that it added accountability to our practice. So you weren't just sitting in a room and just doing whatever that wasn't founded or grounded in anything, that it be evidence-based or be validated by empirical research. However, our field has been around for a very long time, and theory, these theories that are considered to maybe not necessarily fall in that nice category of evidence-based practices are beneficial and are helpful. And so you can see as you go through these slides and as you go through your book, there are great criticisms of evidence-based practice. He talks about it being mechanistic and insensitive to individual differences. That refers to just being very reductionistic. So unless you fit in this nice, neat mold, the client's problems have to fit in this nice, neat mold. I have to sort of conform client concerns to fit a theory that is evidence-based. This isn't super well suited for existential concerns, or maybe clients who really want to go into a great depth about, a number of issues, and that may span countless amounts of time, and it's difficult to measure. It's difficult to measure that concept of, we work well together, and that's why, the therapeutic relationship and the work that the client's doing is benefiting the client. And sometimes it's really hard to measure. I can't measure that with a worksheet. And it's often criticized as being just sort of a tool for insurance companies to maintain costs. So if you do X, Y, and Z in 8 sessions, then, we can assess whether or not your client met these couple of goals, and that's really all you're going to focus on. You're going to focus 8 sessions on these couple of goals, and there you have it. Again, that's what your assignment is going to be around that issue and that concern. I'm not going to spend too much time on multiple and dual relationships. Again, you're going to talk about this a lot in ethics. But in terms of how this relates to theory, none of your theories advocate for you to not have strong boundaries with your clients, and none of your theories are going to advocate for you to put your client in a particularly damaging position to be harmed by having a dual relationship with you. I think that's kind of all I really want you to know about ethical issues and theories. Regardless of your theory, you're following the ACA Code of Ethics. Regardless of your theory. And the ACA Code of Ethics does reference theories, and as a matter of fact, I think it's section C7, I believe, C711 maybe. And it discusses, just pull it up real quickly. Sorry. Closed it out for some reason. Yeah, so C7, so C7A, B, and C reference it. So specifically C7A, when providing services, counselors use techniques, procedures, modalities that are grounded in theory and or have an empirical or scientific foundation. So you can see here that they don't necessarily say it has to have empirical or scientific foundation, but that it has to be proven, and that they have to be grounded in theory, and you have to be knowledgeable in it. Going to C7B, when you are developing techniques and procedures for your clients, that you explain these risks and benefits, and that you minimize any harm. And so you don't use techniques and procedures going into C7C. You don't use techniques, procedures, or theories that are going to be harmful to your clients, even if they are requested by your clients. So this is a controversy with, treatment centers that use spirituality to combat gayness, if you will. We know that that's harmful, and we know that that would be going against our ethical code. You can't pray or wish that sort of. It just doesn't work that way, and so we know that that's harmful, and it's just an example. But okay, so that's really the hot points of Chapter 3, and I will see you guys when we meet again.